Hi, I'm Mark King, Investment Editor at Columbia Threadneedle Investments, and here's what's in my weekly column. So Chancellor Philip Hammond has delivered his first autumn statement to the country, which was widely expected to include an uptick in the minimum wage, a financial boost to the home building sector, and measures to combat rising letting agent fees. All three of these were indeed covered by Hammond in what he announced would be his last autumn statement, not because he's stepping down, but because the government is reforming how it delivers policy announcements. It means the March budget will shift to the autumn, and a formal response to Office for Budget Responsibility figures will now happen in the spring, though this is unlikely to contain any major policy announcements in the way the autumn statement does now. The government's rhetoric ahead of the speech centred around helping the so-called JAM families, which is a rather sweet-sounding acronym for those families that are just about managing. But with a huge and growing deficit, it was always unlikely that the government would be able to find the cash in its coffers to deliver something meaningful to working families. In the event, Hammond did indeed have bad news on the economic front. He warned that the government would borrow £122 billion more than it had planned by 2020 to 21, and the goal of a surplus by 2020 has now been put off until sometime in the next Parliament, which doesn't end until 2024 to 25. The Chancellor also said economic growth would slump to 1.4% in 2017, and over the next 5 years, economic growth will be 2.4% worse than it would have been had we not voted out of the EU. JAM families therefore had little to cheer about, as a cap on welfare spending was retained and most measures aimed at making life a tad easier for them had already been announced. This included a rise in the personal tax allowance to £11,500 in April from £11,000 now, and a commitment for it to rise to £12,500 by the end of the Parliament, all as planned. However, Hammond did also announce a rise in the national living wage from £7.20 to £7.50 an hour from April. That aside, was the autumn statement notable for anything else? Well, it was all about infrastructure and innovation. The infrastructure bonanza included £23 billion to be spent on national projects over the next 5 years, plus an extra £2 billion a year on research and development by 2020 to 21, and funding for 100,000 new homes and 40,000 affordable homes, plus investment in fibre broadband and 5G mobile network trials. Clearly, with monetary policy failing to inspire much growth, there is a chance that infrastructure spend could help deliver a boost to Britain's GDP and might improve the UK's notoriously low productivity. How slim that chance is remains to be seen. Elsewhere, the government said it remained committed to the state pension triple lock for this Parliament, but it refused to commit to it beyond that date. Instead, Hammond said he would review the policy in his next spending review. But there were no policy announcements aimed at getting young people to save more for their retirement, despite Hammond acknowledging in his speech that the government needed to tackle the challenges of rising longevity. Finally, there was very little on the saving and investing front, beyond a new savings bond from NS&I paying 2.2% gross. But with inflation expected to rise beyond that level within 3 years, that may not entice as many people as the government expects. So a reasonably quiet autumn statement then, but one that was delivered with humour and confidence. More will no doubt emerge over the coming days. See you next week.